Sounds good. Let me make sure I'm recording here. What is up, party people? It's Dan, your basement guitar superstar. This is another episode of Creator Spotlight, and it is my privilege and honor to be talking to this gentleman right here, Mr. Jamie Mallender from the UK. He is a very well-traveled musician who plays bass, guitar, and does wonderful preview videos of recording software specific to like Mac, iOS, and stuff like that. So have a lot of stuff I want to ask him about. He's traveled all around the world playing bass and guitar and all that. So Jamie, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, man. So I read through your biography, and it was interesting. It sounds like seeing Queen in '86 at Wembley is what really inspired you to start picking up an instrument hardcore. What about that experience was magical for you?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, for me, growing up, my parents were in a band, but they actually quit. They gave it up when I was a baby, but they were very much into music, and my mum carried on playing. She played piano, she played organ, and sang a lot. And they both continued to be in, amateur productions and things, but they stopped trying to do it professionally. So there was music all the time when I was a kid. But to me, it was just, I liked music, They played Queen and they played Beatles and Carpenters and Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson and stuff like that. And I loved it, but it didn't really sort of bite me until I was 14 and I saw Queen. And then that same year, there was Bon Jovi and Europe at Christmas at #1 and #2 in the UK. And it was just that period, Queen, Wembley 86 to that Christmas and those kind of big commercial heavy rock singles. And it just got me, I don't know why, but that was the time that I knew that I didn't just want to be a music listener. I wanted to, well, if I'm honest, I wanted to be a mega star. I wanted to be in a band, and I wanted to write songs and be in a huge band and take over the world. And that's all I was interested in from that moment on.
Nice. And kind of a similar story for me, although I was, in '86, I was 3 years old. So it wasn't until the mid '90s. What got me into playing, I'm actually a drummer initially, and I saw Fleetwood Mac on a late night TV show, and Mick Fleetwood sitting there like beating the snot out of the drums. I'm like, I want to be like that guy. And
yeah.
So I hear you on that, man, for sure. Awesome. Yeah. So you started out playing bass then, or what did you start out on?
Well, no, yes and no. The way it worked for me was that I knew I wanted to be in a band. I knew I wanted to make music. I didn't really honestly care what I played. So I just kind of started with what was to hand, So my mum played piano and organ, so I played on those at home. And but I didn't really see myself as a keyboard player. I liked playing keyboards, but I didn't really see myself as a keyboard player. Ultimately, I guess to me the keyboards were never really that sexy,
Right.
And nobody in Queen, although they all played keyboards, none of them sort of. As a kid, I didn't identify any of them as, there was a bass player, a guitarist, a drummer, and a singer. I wanted to do one of those things. And so there was a beaten up old acoustic guitar in the house. I played around with that. I fancied that. I saved up some money. And my parents were very wise. They didn't just go like, oh, you want to be in a band? Okay, you know, we'll buy you an instrument. They made me save up, but they made me want it, and they made me show that I really, you know, it wasn't a sort of like a passing thing. So I saved up some money, and then my dad took me to this guy's house, and I bought a beaten up Hondo 2 Les Paul copy.
Nice.
And I think it was 50 quid. And so I had an electric guitar. I didn't have an amp yet. I started learning that. And I was doing all right at guitar. I played guitar for a while. I was doing okay at it. But
You
I
still
kind
have
of
that
also...
guitar, Jamie?
No, sadly, no. It's actually a bit of an embarrassing story what happened to that guitar, because as I decided to do it up myself as a kid and made a horrendous, awful mess of it, and ended up giving it away to some guy who wanted to start learning to play guitar years later. You know, it was like at the back of the wardrobe, hidden, because I'd made such a mess of it. You know, but I kind of always had this thing in my head that I did fancy having a go at drums, because when I watch a band, the drums are always the thing that fascinate me most. You know, when I'm watching a live band, I love drummers, and I'm a massive fan of Roger Taylor from Queen. I mean, I'm an enormous Queen fan, but my very favourite music is Roger Taylor's solo music. So I'd not given up on the idea of playing drums, so I had a go at that. But I found out that the one instrument that I really wasn't natural at was drums. And I still, to this day, I'm probably the worst drummer on the planet. So things with strings seem to be the thing that really worked for me. But what actually happened was I'd put together a bit of a band. You know, we were making a bit of a noise, and I was actually the singer and rhythm guitar player, because we had a friend who was doing really well on guitar. He was really good, and so he was the lead player, but no one would sing. So I was singing, although I knew that if I was going to carry on in a heavy rock type band, that I wasn't going to ultimately be the singer, because I don't have that kind of voice. I sing, but you know, maybe Bowie, T-Rex would be more my kind of area, not Ozzy Osbourne, you know. And that's the kind of thing they wanted to play. They wanted to do like Rainbow and Ozzy and stuff like that. And so one day, the bass player didn't show up for rehearsal, and his gear, including his bass, was in our rehearsal place, and I'd never touched a bass before. So I just said, you know, today I'm going to be bass player, and I switched his amp on and picked up the bass, and just immediately I knew that was the instrument for me. I just played a big open low E, and I was away. I loved it. And so I told my best friend at the time, and still to this day actually, was the keyboard player. And I told him, you know, on the quiet, I said, I really enjoy playing bass, and I want to be a bass player. It's what I want to do. But we've got a bass player, you know. And he said, look, he said, Mal, because all the kids at school had always called me Mal. And he said, Mal, if you want to be the bass player, he said, we'll work with that. You know, we'll find a way to make it happen. And that was why that band broke up, actually, because we left to do something new. And I went and I saved up again, went and got a bass, and I always carried on playing guitar, and I still love playing guitar now. In fact, I play an awful lot of guitar because I teach a lot of guitar lessons. There are more guitar lessons to be done than bass. But, and actually, I love playing. I love having a go with any instrument. I like to be quite versatile and play a lot of different things. But if it's got strings, I stand a chance of being okay. You know, if it involves hitting it with anything, no.
Awesome. So you've been all around the world, it sounds like, playing music. What's some of your best memories from the road? I know you've played at some bigger festivals and stuff. Have you done like Asia and Europe, I'm assuming, in the US and all those? Have you kind of made the rounds, or?
I've done an awful lot in Europe and a lot of playing in the Eastern Bloc. Now, when I was still playing for the Tony Martin band, and that was still a thing, we were scheduled to do an enormous US tour, followed by a tour of Japan, and it looked like it was going to be the making of us, because we were doing well. We'd played some good gigs. Everything seemed to be getting bigger and better. And then we got this 3 months in America and some dates in Canada, and then off to Japan. And due to a rather unscrupulous promoter and some dodgy dealings that we discovered at the last minute, we didn't go. We couldn't go because the money wasn't there. I think this guy just he told us a lot of lies, and he just wanted us to get on the road out there and make what money out of us that he could, and it fell through. And we were heartbroken, because all of us in the band had something else that we did in between Tony Martin band gigs, because when you're playing in a band of that level, you know, you fly out, you do a tour, then you go home and there's a break. So we'd earn quite decent money while we were away, but then you go home and you've got to try and make that money last. So we'd had quite a long break before this tour. And so we'd all some of the lads had got day jobs. Some of them were like, you know, teaching music. And for myself, what I'd actually done was I'd set up a thing going out as a solo covers artist in the UK. And I was just, you know, going around pubs and clubs, just doing a solo set of songs I hated to people who weren't interested, just, you know, to earn some money. And then I got a job in a guitar shop, and I was doing that for a while, doing that and doing a few gigs, but I gave all that up to go and do this tour. So I'd given up all of my work, and then the tour didn't happen, and ended up with nothing. So, so unfortunately, going to Japan and the US, both things have always been a big dream of mine. It never actually happened. So,
True.
So I've kind of done half.
That's obviously not a very good memory. What's some of your best memories of being on?
Oh yeah, best memories. Well, I think some of the best memories. I think the first time that we played in Russia was an incredible experience, because, like, I'm 49, so I was a teenager in, I suppose, what you might call like the Cold War era. And I grew up with films that kind of, you know, American films that always depicted the Russians as being the bad guys.
Right.
And the Russians were the bad guys in every film. And so when we went to Russia, it was just an incredible experience, because we went over to Russia and we found out that Russians are exactly like us. They're just people, and they were wonderful to us. We had a terrific time. And of course, things have just opened up in Russia for young people to listen to what they wanted and wear what they wanted. And they were just discovering heavy rock music. It was fascinating because at that time, there was an awful lot of youngsters, like teenagers and young adults, suddenly getting really into Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Rainbow. And that music was really happening at the time. So for us, going to Russia to play a set of Black Sabbath songs on a bill with bands like Nazareth and Uriah Heep, and we did a big show. We did a tour, actually, a few dates up there with Bonnie Tyler with us and Rick Wakeman with us, and Tony Iommi came out to guest, and Glenn Hughes.
Nice.
And, you know, and playing on a big bill with artists like that. That was an incredible experience. We went to Russia 3 times. We did a lot of dates out there. And another amazing memory from that time was the first time I played a huge arena, which again was in Russia. It was an ice hockey stadium. And it was 15,000 people.
Whereabouts in Russia?
That was in St. Petersburg.
Oh, okay.
We also played some arenas in Moscow. But that first big one in St. Petersburg, when we went out on stage, and because I'd always wondered, you know, like, what would that feel like? Does it just feel the same as when you play a club to a few hundred or 1,000 people, you know? And the thing that struck me was, as the intro tape finished and I ran to the front of the stage, and, you know, the lights come on and the pyros go off and everything, the heat just off the people, that volume of people, you know, that was just an amazing feeling. And I wish I could have gone on to do more of that, but at least I did it.
Right, exactly. So I saw in your bio that you've done stuff with Venom and Saxon. Did you actually tour with them at all, or did you just record with them?
No. Those 2 bands. First of all, with Saxon, what happened was, you know, there are 2 versions of Saxon. There's the Saxon with the original singer, and then there's the Saxon with Graham Oliver and Steve Dawson on bass.
Yeah, which is what I'm more familiar with. Yeah.
Well, Steve Dawson, he was, what was wrong with him? Oh yeah, he had bad knees, and he had a knee operation that he was really struggling to recover from, and he needed his other knee doing. And they've got dates coming up, and he just wasn't able to go on stage. He couldn't stand.
Wow.
And I got a call a few days before. It was like 3 or 4 days before they got this big festival gig, and Graham Oliver called me, and he said, would I be able to stand in for Steve? And so I said, you know, it'd be an honor. I'd love to. So I learned all the sets in 3 or 4 days, and there wasn't any time to rehearse or anything. There just wasn't any time for that to happen. So I just learned all the set, and I went to the festival and just went on and did the gig, and it went great. And I did some more bits with them, but I didn't do a full tour with them. I was just standing guy.
Okay.
But the Venom thing is, I didn't actually work with Venom. The drummer from Venom, a really, really good friend of mine, did some work with us. Well, he was the drummer on tour in the Tony Martin band.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
that's my connection there. Uh, but after the Tony Martin thing sort of fizzled out, Danny went on to do a lot with Venom, and he's still with them. And he actually wrote and recorded at least one album with them so far. And I'm pleased for him, because he's a great guy. He's a phenomenal drummer, and they are an absolutely enormous band. I mean, they play huge gigs. It's because it's more of an underground kind of a music, and
Right.
it's not my first. It's not what I'm really into. So when I saw the kind of size of the gigs that they were actually doing, I was just made up for him. So yes, not my favorite kind of music though. Really.
Right. I was gonna say I would be so jacked if you actually played with Venom because I love that style of music. But wanted to ask you a question about that too, because I think this will be helpful for musicians that are just kind of starting out playing their instrument or starting to get into the world of playing gigs. Obviously, right now it's kind of tough because COVID is happening. But let's set COVID aside. You've had some really cool opportunities, it sounds like. How did you get hooked up with those, and like what advice would you give to younger musicians that are trying to get to that point of touring with bands that are, or make connections that are bigger?
Ooh, well, I have to say that the only real advice that I can give is that if it's really what you want, and you have to be sure that it really is what you want, because if it happens, it's your life. It takes over. You have to be really sure that it's what you want, and you have to be incredibly professional about everything you do, even if right now you are just playing a pub to 3 people and somebody's dog who aren't listening. You have to be as organized and as professional about every aspect of what you do as possible. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, because, if it's going to happen, that means somebody's watching you, so, and there's a lot of competition. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who want it. So you have to be as organized and professional as you possibly can be at all times. It's not about playing the rock star. It's about being serious about what you do. You've got to be ready for it. And you've got to never, ever give up. Because for me, the way it happened for me was I spent my late teens and early 20s trying to be a rock star. In the sense that I joined bands and we wrote songs, we recorded demos, we played gigs, we tried to get noticed. It never really happened. Got very close a couple of times, didn't get there. Then the music scene changed. Nirvana happened. Everything was different. There was no place for us in the music scene anymore with what we were doing. So then I became more of a bass player for hire, local player, played in club bands, played cover shows for money. I got well known locally as being a good pro player who'd turn up on time and do a good job. And that seemed to be a way forward for me. So I was by that time, I was probably sort of approaching my mid-20s. And, I was sort of looking at it from a new point of view, not from the point of view of writing songs and trying to form the best band in the world, but being the best player I could be and seeing who might want to hire me. But then in my late 20s, my personal life became a real disaster. I went through a few years that I'm not very proud of, that I kind of disappeared from the music scene ultimately, and I was not playing. I was in a bad place, and it's kind of a dark period for me. And then what happened was, on my 30th birthday, I woke up and I thought, I live somewhere that I don't want to be. My life is absolutely not where I saw it going. It's the complete opposite, in fact. I've not played for years. The one thing that I really, really always wanted to do, I'm not doing. And I always thought when I was younger, you know, that if I was going to make it, I needed to make it before I was 30, you know, right. Because when you're a teenager, 30 seems like an old dude, you know. So I woke up, and that day I thought, you know, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get back to playing. And even if from now on, all I do is play because I love it, then I'm happy with that. I just need to get back to being in a band and entertaining people, because that's what makes me feel good. So I got up and I packed my stuff up, and I left, and I went to my dad's house, and I told him, you know, I'm making a fresh start. As from today, I need to get back to playing music. I need to sort my head out. I need to sort myself out. And that day, as I was moving my things back into my dad's house, the phone rang at my dad's. And there was a guy on the phone called Des Bailey. Now, Des and his brother Mick, the Bailey brothers, were heavy metal DJs. And they were presenters on Headbangers Ball. But they also grew up in the same village I did. They were older than me. And but after they'd had their time presenting on MTV and gone back to, you know, to the village they came from, Des had been learning to play guitar all along. And he'd been writing songs, and he'd been making demos, and he'd put together a band, and he'd been asking me for a few years to play in this band. Now, I kept turning it down because I just wasn't in a place personally to join the band. And so the phone rang, and as it happened, I picked it up, and it's Des. And he says, right, I'm going to ask you one more time. Right? He says, and he was obviously pretty stressed, pretty wound up. I'm going to ask you one more time. Right? The album's out. We start a tour on Friday. The singer's just left. The bass player's just left. Are you going to come and play bass on this tour for me? And by the way, Tony Martin from Black Sabbath is going to come and sing for us on tour. And I went, okay. So I said, okay, I'll do it. He said, right. He said, there's a garage down the bottom of the estate. Come and meet me down at the garage. I'll give you a CD. Everything's on the CD. Learn it. We start the tour on Friday. So I went down to meet him. I got the CD. I assured him I was serious and everything. I went home to my dad's and got my bass out, and then realised I'd not actually played properly at all for years. So in the space of a few days, I kind of had to relearn how to play and learn all the set.
Wow.
So it was pretty intense. But I did it. And so I actually, a friend of mine actually had been the bass player in the band, a guy called Fasker Johnson, who was another bass player who'd been in Saxon. And so I went and replaced him, and we did a tour. And so that tour was just some UK dates and a bit of a trip out to Belgium. And after the tour was finished, Tony, I didn't know whether any more was going to happen with that band. I would have been happy to continue with that band, but I was sort of just, went home and I was just waiting for, more news about if we were going to do some more gigs. And that call didn't come, but Tony Martin did say to me, you know, if I do a solo tour at some point, would you be interested in playing for me? So of course I said yes. You know, I don't mind. You know, and so it was about a year. About a year, I'd been kind of, you know, playing in a professional band actually, but a professional covers band that just toured up and down the UK. And a band actually did tons and tons of gigs. So I was just kind of, you know, getting my chops back together and getting my gear sorted and, you know, kind of really sort of pulling myself together, sorting my life out as well at the same time, and really kind of got myself very clear and very focused. And then Tony called me and he said, right, he said, my solo album's finished, comes out soon, and I'm going to go on tour. Will you come and play for me? So I did. So in a way, although I tried really, really hard when I was younger, I'd given it everything I got and never made it. Then eventually, when I did get an opportunity to go and play some big gigs with some names, it kind of partially happened by accident, but it would never have happened if, when I was younger, I'd not given this really good account of myself as being someone who was a decent player and very professional and turned up on time and was easy to get along with. You know, right. It's all those things. It's about making sure that all your gear works. It's about having a spare for everything. You know, if you use a power adapter for your pedal board, you need a spare one. If you use those little leads that connect your pedals together, you need a couple of spare ones. Being a professional musician and having the opportunity to go and do something big like that is more about those things and about being a nice guy than it is about being, you know, the best looking guy or the most astounding player, I would say.
Awesome. That's great advice, man. I appreciate you sharing that. And I know a lot of people watching this will too. You know, once I get some more subs and once, you know, more people watch this segment, tell me about Swearbox. How did that get started? Because I thought that name was pretty awesome because I used to work in an office where we had a swear jar.
Oh, really?
I contributed to it a lot. So,
well, Swearbox is, it's, the band came about really in a kind of a nice organic way. The name comes from another place. I was playing, and I'm part of a band. I joined a band called the Paddy Maguire Band, right? Paddy Maguire is an absolutely fantastic bloke, and he's a great guitar player, and he's a phenomenal entertainer. And I joined his band, and it was kind of like a blues rock band. And Paddy's not an especially ambitious musician. He's a guy who does it because he loves it. And I joined the band because we had a great time. And we went and we did a gig in this little pub. And we were setting up in this pub. And Paddy can be a little foul-mouthed. And he has a very, very loud voice as well, Paddy. He has a loud voice that really carries. So we're setting up. And then the landlady, was a really, really small lady, comes and taps him. And she's like, "Oi, if you're going to swear in my pub, you've got to put something in here." And she's got the swear box, right? So Paddy said, "Well, I better put a $5 in now." So he just gets a £5 note out, puts it in the jar. Bit of a down payment. And it kind of stayed with me. I thought, swear box. If I ever set up a band of my own, that would be a great name. So then what actually happened was I was playing some local jam nights, which is quite a big thing around where I live. There's quite a lot of pubs that do it. So,
are there still a lot of pubs that do it in Sheffield where you're at?
yeah, well, there would be if it wasn't for COVID.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, there are quite a lot of pubs where, you know, you'll have a house band on and anyone can go and get up and jam. And I used to host quite a lot of these nights. And so one night we were doing a jam night, and unfortunately, the next decent pub, like in the next village, had a special big charity night on, and everybody that would normally have come to our jam was there. So we'd got a phenomenal house band lineup that night, and we played to about 4 people. There weren't even any guests. So we just got up and played, started at our normal time, and we did about 3 hours. Just kept on playing. And while we were playing, I realized just, although we weren't a band, all musicians that I've worked with plenty of times, but not a rehearsed band. And I thought, you know, this lineup is good enough to just go and do a gig, you know, to actually charge money, and we could actually just go and do a gig. So I thought about it, and I thought some more. And that night we did about 3 hours to hardly anybody with no guests. So I suggested to the lads, you know, I said, I have this idea. I said, what if we had like a pool of players like us and people like us? And what we'll do is we'll kind of, if there's a pub that has a cancellation and they need a band, short notice, you know, if I'm free, I'll just ring round my pool of players and put a lineup together, and we'll just go and do a kind of last minute emergency, off the cuff, jammed gig. And they thought it was a great idea. So I thought, right, we're going to call that Swearbox. And what we'll do is we'll have a charity bucket, right? Because the band was called Swearbox, we started out actually with a cardboard box, which my daughter decorated. And we'll collect money in it for the local children's hospital. So if we caught anybody in the audience swearing, we'd point it out, and they'd have to put a bit of money in the box for the hospital. Of course, whoever was in the band with me ended up putting far more money in than the audience did, because, you know, we're messing about and swearing on stage, and we get away with that because we're giving money to charity. So,
right.
So this thing actually really took off and became a popular local band, and so people started to book us, not just as a last minute, you know, a last minute desperate, we need a band type thing, but actually booking us as a legit band. And they know when they book us that the only thing that they can guarantee is that I will be there, and I will take a lineup of great musicians, just whoever's available on that particular evening. And we will go and play a set of songs that best suit that particular lineup. And, you know, it's just a covers band that just fills up the diary. But it's been one of my better ideas, and it's been going for quite a few years now.
That's a fantastic idea, actually. Do you rotate between guitar and bass for that one then?
No. When we do our electric shows, I always play bass because it's my favorite thing to play. And because actually also I have a lot better choice of guitar players than bass players. There are an awful lot of great guitar players around here, not so many bass players. And of course, the ones that are really good are busy.
Right.
But when we do acoustic shows, which we actually do a lot of, I play mostly guitar in that, some bass. I kind of actually, in the acoustic shows, I use it as an excuse to move between bass and guitar, and I play my 12 string, I take my mandolin, you know, I use the cigar box guitar. Basically, when we're playing an acoustic show, we take a lot less gear in, but I take an awful lot more instruments.
Nice. So how much does your set change between those though? Is it kind of the similar songs just made acoustic, or do you have like, okay, for this gig for electric, we're going to play more Zeppelin and Rainbow and stuff like that. And then if we do acoustic, it's going to be more like Jefferson Airplane and Fleetwood Mac and different things like that. Or how does that work usually?
I'd say it's probably about half and half. I'd say when we do an acoustic set, about half of it will be acoustic versions of what we would do possibly in an electric set. But then the other half is stuff that we are doing because we are in an acoustic format. And of course, both versions of the band, the songs always vary drastically depending on who's with me.
Right.
Like I have a good friend called Tom Kilner, who's a young, great blues artist and also a vintage player. And he's just a great blues singer, great blues guitarist. So when he's with us, the set will be more, you know, bluesy because we're playing to his strengths. So
awesome. So how'd you get hooked up with vintage then?
Well, because you know, when you're a kid and you start out, right, and you've got no money, and you need all of this gear to be able to go out and play some gigs to earn some money, right? So I'd always dreamed of having endorsements. I always thought that would be like a really, really special thing to have an endorsement deal, you know? And I'd always really wanted that. And so when I got the Tony Martin gig, I thought, well, now I'm playing for a big name. Now's the time to try and make that happen. So I'd bought a Dan Electro pedal. Excuse me. When I was looking for a chorus pedal, and I tried every chorus pedal out there, you know, just went through loads and loads of chorus pedals. And I ended up, the cheapest one I tried was a Dan Electro Cool Cat. And I love the way it sounded on bass, although it's intended for guitar. So I thought, right, I'm going to look up Dan Electro and I'm going to send him a message. I'm going to ask him for an endorsement deal. So I found Dan Electro online, I found the website, sent them a message, and they replied to me saying, we don't actually deal with endorsees because it's an American company. So we don't deal with the endorsees in other territories. It would be the local dealer that would sort you out a deal. And that would be a company called John Owen Biscuits, who distribute Dan Electro in Europe. So I contacted John Owen Biscuits, and I was put in touch with a guy called Gavin Coulson. Are you familiar with Gavin?
I've heard the name before. I don't know that I know who he is.
Yeah. Well, Gavin used to be the artist liaison guy at JHS. So he was basically in charge of all the deals and arrangements and basically, you know, keeping the endorsees happy. And he happens to be an absolutely amazing, wonderful individual, one of my best friends these days. And a tremendous guitar player, ridiculously good bass player. He's one of those guys he's just sickening because on top of all that, you know, he's a really nice fella as well, you know. So I contacted this guy, Gavin Coulson, and I told him I was after a Dan Electro deal, and he sorted me out a Dan Electro deal. So, you know, I got a Dan Electro fuzz pedal, and I felt like the king of the world, right? Because I could say I've got an endorsement deal. And then he said to me, he said, "Are you looking for a deal for bass guitar?" Because he said, "I know you play Music Man, but you know, we have some basses if you might be interested in coming and having a look." Well, I kind of wasn't that interested because I just contacted Music Man because I was playing a Music Man bass, and I just contacted them, and they'd agreed to give me an artist deal, and that felt like, you know, that was a big deal because Music Man's a big name. And being able to put Music Man on like my advertising, you know, that was a big thing. But the truth of it was that an artist deal for a Music Man, for somebody like myself who wasn't a huge name, meant that I would get a Music Man for quite a lot of money off, I have to say. But it would still cost me a certain chunk that I could never afford. Right. So I did realise that whilst it was nice being a Music Man artist, I was never actually going to be able to afford to buy another one. So after a while, I contacted Gavin and I said, "Can I come and have a look what you've got?" So I went up to visit John O'Miskew's, and I looked around the showroom, and he showed me Fret King stuff. He showed me vintage stuff and Dan Electro, and I had a good play with everything. And at first, it was the Fret Kings that really kind of struck me. It was the Fret King Ventura, actually, that I really fell in love with. So I took a Fret King Ventura home with me and a Perception bass as well, and did a deal. And they said, you know, you don't have to stop being a Music Man artist. You can still be a Music Man artist and endorse our stuff as well. You know, we're not exclusive like that. So I thought, great, right? Wow. So I'll have Music Man and Fret King. And I played some vintages, but I didn't take that much notice of them at the time. And I think at the time I was still a bit of a gear snob. I think at the time I was still of the opinion that if you were going to get a great instrument, it was going to cost you a lot of money. And vintages just, you know, they're not expensive. So I didn't really take them very seriously. So I was a Fret King artist, and then I was at a guitar show, and I was there sort of, you know, representing the Fret King thing. And then there was a vintage fretless, the one that they make that's like a tribute to Jaco Pastorius.
Oh, sure. Okay, I've seen pictures of it.
Yeah, well, it was on the stand next to me. Now, I'd had a go at playing fretless bass a number of times before. I'd actually owned 3 fretless basses before, and I'd never got on with it. I'd never been successful with it. It just hadn't worked for me. And so I picked up this fretless, you know, and I had a go. And suddenly it seemed to have gelled. And this bass just felt incredible. And all of a sudden, I seemed to have got my head around playing fretless bass. So I kind of inspected this bass, you know, and checked the price tag. The price tag was £300. Now, £300 for an instrument that sounded that good and felt like it seemed like too good to be true, really, for me. So then I kind of went round the vintages on display and had a good look and played a bunch of them. And I was just a bit fascinated, really, because they were just great, great instruments for really not a lot of money. So I took one of those fretlesses home with me. I very quickly did a deal for vintage as well. I'm like, Gavin, can I be a vintage artist as well as a Fret King artist? Would that be okay? You know, and did the deal straight away. Now, of course, the thing about vintage is, because they are tremendous instruments but don't cost that much, it means you get to expand your collection quite quickly. So around about that time, what I did was I sold nearly all of my instruments. I sold everything that wasn't Fret King or vintage, because I'd got quite a big collection of basses and guitars by this point. I'd got the Music Man. I'd got a Yamaha Billy Sheehan Attitude bass, a limited edition anniversary purple one, which was my pride and joy, actually, but I couldn't play it because Billy's a huge guy. And, like, you know, he's probably my biggest inspiration as a bass player and a wonderful human being. But he's a big guy and his hands are enormous. I met him once and my hand fitted in that part of his hand.
Dang.
Because, you know, I'm a small guy and I've got very, very small hands. So I had this bass and I couldn't play it. And the Music Man was a great, great bass. But I thought that endorsing that product is not going anywhere for me. I've got a bunch of Ibanez stuff. I've got some Squires and all kinds of stuff. And I just decided I'm going to go all in with Fret King and vintage. It's not about putting Music Man on my posters anymore because it's Music Man and I want to show off. I could do, but I thought I'm just going to sell everything. And the only thing that I kept that wasn't Fret King or vintage was a Squire Custom 2 which is a sentimental thing. And so I sold everything off and I used that money to start my Fret King and vintage collection. So now I have, I'm just looking around, I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got 5 Fret King basses that are just stunning world-class instruments. And then I don't actually know what the number is, but I've then got about 5 vintage basses and about, including acoustics, there's probably about 15 vintage guitars.
Wow.
That's my collection to now.
Nice. And I've kind of done something similar, Jamie. I was at 13 guitars a couple months ago. And then I really started digging into vintage online because I would hear these guys talking about them. Like, hey, these guitars, and I'd watch videos and they sound amazing. And, you know, over here, they're $400 or $500. And I'm like, well, dude, this sounds as good to me as like a Fender Strat or a Gibson Les Paul. So I started buying them. And then, like, that guitar behind me right now, that is one of 3 guitars I have left that's not a vintage.
Yeah, yeah.
They're that good. And it's hard to get that through. You know, you see all these guys on Facebook that are, you know, Fender and Gibson snobs. Some of them you're never going to win over, but it's like, dude, I would rather own 5 vintage V6s than a $3,000 custom shop. You know,
yeah,
Stratocaster.
yeah,
They're that good.
I feel exactly the same. I just briefly one little experience related to that is there's there's a gentleman I know who's not really much of a guitar player, but he's got a bit of money and he likes to collect guitars. And he's collected a few really nice Gibsons, a few really, really nice Les Pauls. And they're all really very nice examples of that particular model. Now, he had a go on my vintage Paradise, you know, the AFD, the Slash tribute guitar. Yeah. He had a go on that. And he had one of his Les Pauls with him, his Pride and Joy, actually, which is worth a few grand.
Right.
It's like, you know, it's worth some money. And he was like heartbroken. It was quite fascinating watching the way that it affected him, because he's got this thing about Gibsons and Les Pauls, and that's the holy grail. And for him to play what is essentially, let's be honest, a copy brand, and it actually blows all of his Les Pauls out the water, in his own words, he could not get his head around that, right? And he's like, what have you put in this? What have you done to it? You know, where's the sick? And honestly, that guitar, I've done nothing to it. I've set it up, I polish it sometimes. That's it, you know?
Yeah.
So it really, when it dawns on you that you can get an instrument of that quality for a tiny fraction of the price, then it really does then become a question of how important is that name on the headstock to you. And for me, it's not important. And actually that works very, very well for me, because if we're honest about my position in the music industry, I managed to achieve a sort of a small status, a little bit of fame, you know, a bit of a name for myself. I played for some artists who were famous. I'm not famous, you know, I'm not a big deal in my own right.
Right.
But I managed to be successful enough to be able to get quite a lot of endorsement deals. And after that experience, where I just stopped advertising the Music Man thing and I sold it, and went over to Vintage and Pratt King, and I got Dan Electro, of course, I thought, you know what I'm going to do is I am going to take on board endorsements for instruments and equipment that is affordable. I will endorse products that are good enough to use professionally, but don't cost the earth. And as luck would have it for me, the next thing that happened was that Larry Hartkey sent me an email asking me if I would like to be a Hartkey endorsee. Nice. So I was using Hartkey, which I bought and paid for myself. And I was looking to get a new bass head, because mine had done a lot of miles, you know, needed to have a backup. And he contacted me and asked me if I'd like to be an endorsee. And the Hartkey, again, for me, is a brand that is a well-respected, solid brand. It does a great job. It's a workhorse. It lasts well on the road. But it's a tiny fraction of the price of going and buying yourself an Ampeg, which, you know, I don't even want an Ampeg. I want a Hartkey. So right. Having products to endorse in that sort of category has worked really, really well for me. Because, you know, as you know, I teach a lot. And before COVID, played a lot of jam nights. I help a lot of musicians who are up and coming. And also, I make the YouTube videos talking about recording and using software. I do some lessons and stuff like that. So I'm constantly in contact with people who are up and coming, people who are learning, and being able to suggest a product to them that I endorse that's at an affordable price point works well. You know, I can sell that stuff. Like, the XVive U2s, the wireless thing, the little plug thing.
Yeah.
Right? That, I mean, I must have personally sold like hundreds and hundreds of units of that. And it's no effort at all because it works well. It's a great product. Don't cost a lot. I should, if I had a quid for everyone I sold, I'd have another guitar.
Nice. Yes. Yeah, I mean, hopefully I filled out that artist thing on Vintage's website, knowing there's no way in Hades they're gonna even consider me just because my channel's so small now. But hopefully I'll get to a point at some point where they're like, yeah, we can, endorse this guy or have this guy as an endorsee or something. But so fingers crossed with that. But wanted to ask you about bass playing specifically. When you first started out playing, whether it was guitar or bass, are there any certain periods where you got kind of stuck or you plateaued? And if so, what are some techniques that you learned, like maybe finger exercises or certain things to play that helped you snap out of that and really grow as a musician?
Well, yes, I have been through stages where I felt, for quite a long time, I've not really improved. I'm kind of treading water. I'm not learning anything new, and I think for me, the way to kind of break out of that and get excited about it again and start moving forward with what you're discovering and what you're able to play, I think, is to do the boring thing, or the thing that everybody thinks of as being boring. Have a look at the theory of it. Have a look at the fretboard. Find a new angle, When I teach, a lot of it is about trying to get people who maybe have reached a certain level as a musician to just look at the fretboard from a different point of view. Just work it out in a different way and open up possibilities, So I think for me, what's happened is when I've got a bit stuck, I've kind of done some research for myself and done some learned a new skill, a new technique, or a new scale, or a new way of approaching something that I already knew or thought I did. And that tends to open up doors musically, I think that's definitely always been the way that's helped me, because I like to create a lot, right? I really, the biggest buzz of all for me, especially now I'm older, I think, is always when you come up with something new. When you play something, you go, oh, that's good. That could be a tune. And I tend to find that I discover those things when I've been doing some learning for myself.
Sure.
I think the biggest piece of advice I could give about learning bass guitar and getting good at it is a lot of players think that flying around the neck very quickly is that's the next level. That's the impressive stuff. And in some ways, you know, it is in some ways. But what I like to impress upon players is, if you can put your hand in one position on the bass and you can call up any interval, any sound, without moving your hand left or right, because under your hand, if you're playing a 4-string bass, under your hand, you've got 16 notes. So you have got every possible interval inside and outside of the scale. You can make every sound possible without moving your hand. Just moving your fingers. If you can command the instrument from that one position by calling upon every sound that you need, you know, whether a simple example, you know, like you're playing a minor blues and you move your minor third to a major third and get that nice blues minor to major feel, you know. A simple example, but that's the kind of thing I mean. Being able to find the sounds without moving. Then you can play in any situation. You know, if you know what's under your hand, you can be a last minute depth for a band. You can be that guy that everybody calls, you know, when the bass player's ill, can't turn up, mum won't let him come out to play, you know. And once you've got that down, then you can learn all the flying about from different patterns that you need.
Nice. So what kind of, one last thing for you, actually a couple, what have you not accomplished yet that you'd like to do still? Other than touring the US and Japan, like we talked about.
What have I not accomplished? Well, I think, you know, when I first set out to do this, my goal was to be a huge megastar. You know, I was looking at Queen and Bon Jovi and bands that size, and that's what I wanted. I didn't want to be in a band that was kind of nearly as big as that. I wanted that.
Right.
And I never achieved that. But I did have a phenomenal amount of fun and some great experiences along the way. And I think what I proved to myself is that if that had happened for me when I've been a young man, I don't think I would have been the right kind of person to survive that unscathed, if you know what I mean.
Oh, sure.
It takes...
I have.
It takes an incredible strength in an individual to achieve that kind of success in the music business and come out smiling the other side. You know, it really does. There are an awful lot of scarred people in this business, and I feel that had it happened to me when I was a younger man, I would be one of those unfortunate victims for whatever reason. But I would have loved to have continued to tour doing huge gigs. But the music business, just when that happened for me, the music business just seemed to be going down the toilet fast. And there was just so little money in anything. And of course, the money disappeared from releasing music as well. I mean, that was the real killer for the business. For me, I would have loved to have had a hit record, have either performed on one or written one, you know. That's never happened. But as I've got older, I've got new challenges now, you know, because I'm now almost 50 and I'm still making a living as a musician. And whilst it's not a very fabulous living at the moment with COVID happening, because I've not played a gig for nearly a year, right, doing a lot of teaching, and, scraping by any way I can. But I am making a living as a full-time professional musician. And in this day and age, that's really, really not easy. Because I don't have like any, great royalties coming in from anywhere. Unfortunately, I don't have that kind of track record. So for me, if I can continue to make a living from making music and teaching music and still enjoy it, because every morning when I wake up, I look forward to my day, because, I come into my studio and I teach people how to play music. And then I record videos where I teach people how to use music software or how to play an instrument. And if COVID wasn't happening, a few evenings a week, I go out and I perform for people and entertain people. I don't make a fabulous living, but to be able to do what you love and feed your family, that's success. What I would like to achieve next really is I would like to grow my YouTube channel. I think since the beginning of lockdown, that's been my main focus, because as soon as lockdown happened, I knew it was not going to go away overnight. I could see it. And I think we are still going to be quite a long time in the UK before we have very many gigs happening at all. And I think that when gigs do start happening again, they will not be well paid, because the competition will be stiff. There will be a few gigs happening, and all the bands will want those gigs. And a lot of bands don't do it for a living. And a lot of those bands that don't do it for a living are actually great bands. They'll get the work. So where I'm trying to go with this actually is, at the beginning of lockdown, I decided it was time to grow my YouTube. I'd had a YouTube account for about 10 years, and I'd not used it much. If I got an endorsement deal with a company and they needed a video from me, I'd make a video and I'd put it on YouTube. I'd make a video now and again if I fancied it and put it on YouTube. But there might be years in between my videos. And I thought, I've always wanted to have a go at YouTube and never really had the time. So now I'm going to get stuck into it. So at the beginning of lockdown, I had 200 subscribers. And now I've got 1,000 more than that. I've broken that 1,000 barrier, where I now qualify for monetization and I'm allowed to live stream. I started live streaming, and I've been getting my website updated recently, sorting out my merchandise. I'm moving all that to Bandcamp because I want to get everything in one place. And I think Bandcamp is the right site for me.
Sure.
And I'm trying to build up my Patreon. So my Patreon account, what I'm actually doing there is, because I got a Patreon account at the beginning of lockdown, because it seemed to go hand in hand with building YouTube. And at first, I got a couple of people on there. I didn't really know what to do with it. You're supposed to provide them with, some stuff that they can't see anywhere else. I didn't really know what to put on there. I think I made a bit of a shoddy job of it in the beginning while I found my feet. And then it just clicked. So what I'm doing now is, on my Patreon, I have 2 tiers. You can join it for £1 or $1 or €1 per month. And for that, you get anything that's in the feed. You get to see anything in there. You get to download all of my music that I've recorded for free. And if you're into learning to play bass or guitar, there's lessons on there. And if you're into the mobile music recording stuff that I'm really into, there's loads of stuff to support you with that on there. And you can ask me to make you a video. So if you want me to answer a question about my failed rockstar career, I'll make you a video reply. If you want me to show you how to use a particular bit of software that you're struggling with, I'll make a video of how to do it, and I'll put it on my Patreon. But for the £5 tier, you can get me involved with the making of your music. So if you make music in your home studio and you're struggling, you know, like you reach a point with a track and you're like, I don't know what to do next. What chord shall I go to here? What change does this song need? What's wrong with this mix? You know, how do I master? How do I use this plugin? You can contact me through Patreon and I will get involved in your music. I'll help you mix it. I'll even play on it. You know, you can send me a project. You know, if you're using GarageBand, I've got GarageBand. I've got all the digital audio workstations. Send me a project. I'll work on it for you and send it back to you. So I'm trying to move forward by building YouTube to a point where I'm making a bit of money at it, making a bit of steady income from my Patreon, teaching as much as I possibly can, just like this, you know, on Skype or Zoom or Microsoft Message or whatever, you know, whatever the customer wants. And hoping to survive until we get to go out and play gigs again.
Awesome. And for those of you watching, I will post links to all of Jamie's stuff, his YouTube channel, his Patreon, his music on Spotify in the description. So hit the little down arrow and it'll all be in there. Jamie, one last question for you. What is in your CD player right now, or on your record player, or on your Spotify, just out of curiosity?
Well, actually, on my Spotify, it's actually my It's All Good album, because I was just looking at my Spotify to make sure I transferred everything I've released over to my Bandcamp. Because what I've done is I've transferred it over to Bandcamp, but it's not all seen yet. There's a few tracks there. And what I'm doing is each day, starting from tomorrow, I'm going to make a new track visible. And so that will give me something new to advertise every day to help me build up my Bandcamp. But in my actual CD player, it's the first Roger Taylor album, Fun in Space.
Nice. Awesome. How did you, because one of the things I love about your videos, I am a total rookie when it comes to recording. Like, I've just played drums on my old band's 2 records that we did. I love your videos because I feel like I can go in and watch one, and in 15 minutes, because of how good you are at explaining stuff, I feel like I can at least somewhat navigate the software you're talking about. What made you want to get into that?
Well, what happened was, when my little boy, because my youngest kid is 6, when he was little, and I was, because me and the missus, she works in the day and I work in the evening and at weekend. So in the daytime, I'm responsible for the kids. So of course, when he was a nipper, before he was at nursery or anything like that, my day was looking after the wee one. So I was unable to get things done, like advertising my band's gigs, trying to get gigs, you know, preparing my guitar lessons, things like that. So the missus bought me an iPad for my birthday, and it was the iPad Air, because the iPad Air 2 had just come out, which meant that there was a great big discount off the Air. So she bought me that. And of course, it was amazing because I could be looking after the nipper and carrying my iPad around. I'm designing a poster, you know, and, you know, just wipe his mouth and, you know, carry on booking a gig. It was just having that mobile device was phenomenal. But of course, it wasn't long before I was thinking, I wonder what I can do in terms of music making with this thing. And so, of course, I went on YouTube and I found this guy called Doug Woods, who runs the Sound Test Room. And Doug Woods was making music, phenomenal sounding music, with his iPad, right? And he was running this channel where he's teaching people how to make music using an iPad. And the more I watched it, the more I just became fascinated with it. And I ended up watching hundreds of his videos, and I still do. And I kind of learned a lot of what I know now from Doug. And I just became totally fascinated with it. And so I started making music myself with my iPad. And then when I started to build up my YouTube, because the thing about YouTube is, what's going to be your main thing, right? If you want to make it on YouTube, people want to know, what are they coming to your channel for? And I thought, what I'm really, because I could have done just like bass lessons, because I'm very passionate about bass, but there's a lot of people doing bass lessons on YouTube and some phenomenal players, well established. And I thought, the other thing that I'm really passionate about is this recording with mobile devices. I thought maybe I could do a bit of that, right? Doug's a keyboard player, and so maybe I could come at this from the angle of a player of things with strings, right? And I my first videos weren't fantastic, but I stuck at it, and I've been making improvements along the way. I've been very, very self-critical about it, you know. There's still things when I watch my videos that I want to be better. But of course, as you will know, doing this, the equipment don't come cheap.
No,
and
it doesn't.
I've had to learn ways of doing things without spending any money, because in this COVID situation, I'm really not earning that much. So, like, for an example, at the moment, as I'm talking to you, the light on me, I've got two bedside lights that you can't see because they're out of shot, pointing at me, but they've both got a white cloth over the bulbs. So I cut up an old white t-shirt and put white cloth over the front, so it's a softer light, right? And I've got a ring light that cost a tenner from China, you know, and I've got a bunch of these things, you know, that that hold your camera phone while you're filming and stuff, you
Right.
know. But what I found, all kinds of like cheap fixes for things, and you know, the best one is, right? I've got a spare phone down here. I'll just show you this in case you don't know this. Old iPhone 6 Plus, I think, right? So if you need a way to stand your phone up to do some filming, capo.
That is amazing.
Right?
I never would have thought of that.
There you go. Yeah, it's stuff like that. And it's frustrating because I sometimes look at my videos and I think, oh, I could do so much better a job if I could afford one of these or one of those. But at the end of the day, the kind of thing I'm doing is I'm teaching people how to use stuff. So really, as long as that content is good, everything else is just window dressing, really. So.
Right. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for humoring me. I appreciate it.
No. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure, man. I'll let you go because we've been going at it for a while now, actually.
Oh, well.
So,
Yeah.
and you probably need to get back to teaching. So,
I'm actually done teaching this evening. The next thing for me is dinner.
okay. I
Yeah.
don't want to keep you from that.